Welcome back. This is lesson 4 of Unit 1 and the last lesson in this unit, and we are going to be talking about local government. The first thing I want to talk about, though, is the exam. After this lesson, there is an exam for Unit 1, and I just want to give you a 1-minute kind of my philosophy on exams. So I think that exams are to help test your understanding of these concepts, as they will benefit you in the rest of your life. So I'm going to test you over things that I think are things that you should know, not what is the population of Houston or something like that. That's not something that's going to be necessary for you. Specific dates that something happened, usually not anything that we're going to need to remember. So when you are studying for your exam, keep that in mind, and so realize that the things that I am going to be asking you about are things that are just general concepts, things that you're maybe going to see on a ballot one day, or you're going to have, in play in an election that you vote in. So another thing, though, that you need to remember is that the tests are all going to be given online. You will be given ample time to complete the test, and if you use the notes that go along with these slide presentations, those are your review sheet. So there's not going to be an extra review sheet. Your review sheet you already have, and it is in the form of notes. Occasionally people will ask me if they are allowed to use their notes on the exams. I mean, of course, I would love it if you could take the exams without using your notes, but everyone else is going to be using their notes. So everybody has access to their notes during the exams. And so, you're gonna do worse than everyone else if you choose to take the exams without using your notes. So, as a practical reason, I would say go ahead and use your notes on the exams, because everyone else is going to be doing it, and so you want to just have a level playing field. Okay, so after this this lesson, you will have all the information you need that is going to be tested over on the Unit 1 exam. Okay, so let's get started on local governments. So we're going to talk about local governments in 3 different parts. First, we're going to talk about municipal governments, then we'll go to county governments, and then we'll go to special districts and councils. So we're going to pretend like we are living at the TCC Northeast campus, which is in Hurst, Texas. And so we will talk about Tarrant County, and we'll talk about Hurst as an example city that would be the city government. So let's jump in and talk about municipal governments first. So local governments in Texas are a big part of the makeup of Texas government. So in the United States, we have a pretty substantial percentage of the local governments that there are in the United States. They are in Texas. So you can just see by the numbers, even though we only are 2% of the states in the United States, we have 8% of the population, we have 8% of the school districts, we have 7% of special districts. We don't have any townships. Townships is more of a thing usually in the Northeast. We have 5% of the municipal or city governments and 8% of the county governments. So if you average that all out, that is, we have about 5%, even though we only have 2% of the actual state, of the states, we have 5% of the local governments in Texas. Municipal governments rose over, about the 1950 to 1980 time period, but then have really leveled off. And so there was a steep rise in the establishment of different municipal or city governments, but that has really leveled off in the past few years. There haven't been a whole lot of new city governments that have been established. You can see, though, that population has been increasing significantly in Texas. And so even though we've had a sharp increase in population, we haven't really, only those municipal governments that are already established have been increasing the number of people that they are responsible for. We haven't been adding new municipal governments. There are two different kinds of municipal or city governments in Texas. You can either be a home rule city, which means that you have more than 5,000 people that live in your city, or you can be a general law city, and that means you have 5,000 people or less that live in your city. So the difference between these two are the document that controls, or the control of the city. In a home rule city, there is a charter, a city charter, that is the governing document of the city and says, how many council members there are going to be and how the city's organized, and provides a lot of different intricacies into the city government. A general law city is a smaller, has a smaller number of people, and the legislature is the one who decides, how the city government is going to be organized. So it's not going to be, specific for each different city based on whatever the people in that city want to do. So the smaller cities have less say over how their city is run. The things you need to remember with municipal government is anything in the municipal government charter, or any of the laws that set up the municipal government or that are enacted by the municipal government cannot conflict with state law. So they will always be subject to whatever state law, which is going to be the law that is controlling if there's a conflict between the two laws. The municipal government can only have as much power as whatever vehicle that created it. So is it the city charter, the document or the vehicle that created the city government? That's going to be the extent of that government's power. So if the city charter says, the mayor serves a 4-year term, well, then that's going to be the controlling law in that city with respect to the mayor. If the Texas Constitution or some other Texas law or Texas legislature has organizes the city and has control of the city government and how it's organized, then that's going to be what tells you, for example, how the city council is organized, how many people are there, what kind of elections are there, things like that. City elections are nonpartisan. So you'll notice when you go vote that when you get to the part that talks about city council members or the mayor, all of those elections are nonpartisan. So you won't see a Republican or Democrat or Libertarian name next to them. So again, the city government only has as much power as the creating document. So when you have a question about, well, can the city council do this or can the mayor do this, you have to just check the document. We can't really paint with a broad brush here and talk about how all cities are organized because they each have different documents. Can a city issue a referendum or a recall of an elected official, or can they put initiatives on their ballot? Only if the creating document allows it. Can there be term limits for officials? And if so, how long is their term? Whatever the document says. Are there 50% plus one of the vote required in a city election in order to elect someone before there is a runoff? Whatever the creator document says. Are city council members elected from single member districts or at-large elections? Again, you have to check the creator document. And so if the creator document says there are single member districts, then they're single member districts. So when we talk about term limits, what is that and what is allowed? So a term limit means that a person can only serve a specified number of terms in an office at a time. And so, for example, if we want to use an example from the federal government, the President of the United States can only serve 2 terms. We have a 2-term limit for the President of the United States. So same thing, municipal governments can put in term limits if they want to. You can have a hard term limit, meaning 2 terms or 3 terms, and then that's it. You can't serve any other term period, no matter what, if you live in Houston. So if I'm mayor and there's a 2-term limit, if I am doing a great job and everybody wants me to run for a 3rd term in Houston, I cannot do that. You can have a term limit, but then run again if you sit out for a specified time. And that's how Dallas does it. So the way they do it in Dallas is if I'm mayor and there's a 2-term limit, I can serve my 2 terms and then I can sit out while someone else is the mayor for a term, and then I can run again. And then you can have term limits that can be waived if 5% of the voters agree to waive it, and that's what happens in Austin. So again, in my initial example, if I'm the mayor of Austin and there is a 2-term limit, I serve my 2 terms, and then I'm doing such a fantastic job that everybody wants me to serve a 3rd term. Well, you can't, I can run for a 3rd term if 5% of the voters agree that the term limit should be waived for me. So again, you just have to check the document and see what specifics are allowed with respect to term limits. Now, the creating document rules as far as what happens with a city government, except the state says when municipal elections will be. So municipal elections are all at the same time. The state says which cities can have mass transit, and the state sets rules for annexation, and we will talk about that again in just a minute. But annexation is where a city takes over another part of land. And why does the state step in these 3 different instances? If you think about it, municipal elections are something that everybody in the state needs to be kind of on the same page about. Everybody needs to be electing their people at the same time so that we can have elections at a, there's just not elections all over the place at, every weekend or every month of the year. Elections need to be at an organized time so everybody in the state knows that an election is coming up. Mass transit really is something that is crosses county lines and city lines and is something that the state should be involved in. And then finally, the annexation rules again, it's a city trying to take land that doesn't belong to the city, and so that, that city or that land needs to be protected, and so the state can step in there. Annexation is the vehicle by which a city can take up to 10% of its existing area each year. So if a city is 100 square miles, then this year it can take 10 square miles of the adjacent land. And so then it'll be a city that is 110 square miles. So then next year it can take 10% of 110 or 11 square miles, and then so on and so on, and it can continue to annex additional lands until it runs out of land that it can annex. The only issue is the city must be able to support the land it takes, so it can't annex a plot of land and then not be able to provide it with a sewage system or garbage collection or electricity or anything like that. It must be able to support the land that it annexes. The good thing about annexation is if people move out of an area, then a city can annex that area and take care of it. So there's not a whole lot of vacant space where crime can set up and nobody's taking care of the area. A bad thing about annexation is that sometimes people don't want to be annexed. So sometimes people live out in the middle of nowhere because they want to live out in the middle of nowhere and they don't want to be in a city and they don't want to be subjected to city regulations. So it just, annexation is something that can happen, but some people like it, some people don't. No government can force a city to annex another area. So if the state of Texas sees a plot of land that nobody's taking care of, and maybe there's an infestation of wild animals that are hurting people, or there is a crime element that is moved in, or maybe it's just an area between two cities that just looks really crummy, and so the state wants somebody to take over that land so the state doesn't have to take care of it anymore. It cannot force any of the adjacent cities to annex the area. It can recommend that they annex, but really the annexation decision is only left up to the city. So let's talk about state law. State law supersedes municipal rules if there is a new law. A city cannot make a rule that conflicts with state law, but if there is no state law when the city makes a rule, but later the state comes in and makes a law on that issue, then the state law wins. So basically the state law is always going to win. For example, the city of Denton banned hydraulic fracking in their city because there was no state law about whether or not cities could ban fracking or regulate fracking. But after Denton banned fracking, the legislature enacted a law that said cities can't regulate fracking, that is something not within their power. And so Denton loses. Denton loses the ability to ban fracking in their area. Another example is when Austin set rules on Uber and Lyft, saying that they wanted Uber drivers and Lyft drivers to have to be fingerprinted, to be background checks, to be a more regulated industry than it was. There was no rule or law that addressed Uber and Lyft or a city's ability to regulate rideshare companies. But after Austin set its strict rules to basically drive Uber and Lyft out of the cities unless they were going to adhere to these strict rules, the legislature set a statewide framework for rideshare companies that included less rigorous background checks and requirements for drivers who drove for the rideshare companies. And so if you think about this in the context of our last lecture, you can think about, why did this happen? I would bet it happened because after Austin set its strict rules on Uber and Lyft formed an interest group and hired lobbyists to lobby the state government and say, hey, this city is regulating our business. We think that this is an issue that should be left to the state government to regulate, so why don't you introduce a bill, Mr. Legislature, and pass a bill that outlines the regulations. And by the way, here are the regulations we think you should implement. And then the last example we'll talk about is the sanctuary city example. And what that meant was some cities were refusing to enforce immigration laws or cooperate with immigration officers because the cities felt like the immigration laws were not appropriate, were too strict for for the city to have to enforce. The state legislature then banned sanctuary cities and required cities to abide by and cooperate with immigration officials. And so in Texas now, sanctuary cities have been banned. So what are sanctuary cities? Sanctuary cities are just places where the city says we don't agree with the federal immigration laws, and so basically we're not going to do your immigration enforcement for you. If the federal immigration agents want to enforce their own laws, then they can, but we're not going to help you at any time. There was a case that arose May 8th, 2017. There was a law banning sanctuary cities signed by Greg Abbott, and the very next day the law was challenged in federal court in San Antonio, claiming that it violated the U.S. Constitution. So what happened was there was a case where a tractor-trailer driver was pulled over, and it was in San Antonio, and when the tractor-trailer was examined, it was found that he was carrying 12 illegal immigrants. And so because San Antonio was a sanctuary city, instead of sending the 12 illegal immigrants to, handing them over to the federal government to, send back to wherever they came, the city of San Antonio released those 12 illegal immigrants to a private organization, Catholic Charities, who was working to, working with illegal immigrants to either get them services or help them have a path to citizenship, or let them be advised on their different options. And so when the city of San Antonio was found, with the city of San Antonio's refusal to turn those people over to the federal immigration department, there was a lawsuit as to whether or not San Antonio was violating federal law, but their regulation, and San Antonio claimed that the federal law could not, or the Constitution could not allow the state to say sanctuary cities were banned. In March 2018, a federal appeals court allowed most of the law to go into effect, except for the part punishing those who don't comply. So most of the sanctuary city law could go into effect, except for the part punishing the cities that do not comply with the regulation. So November 18th, we had Texas versus San Antonio, because San Antonio was not enforcing immigration laws because they thought that Texas's requirement to make San Antonio enforce immigration law was not within Texas's power, and Texas disagreed. And where we left it in July of 2019 was that part of the claims in this case were dismissed because there was an injunction saying that the law was not going to be able to take effect in full. So there are, I put a few different copies of kind of not serious signs that are put up in different sanctuary cities, like for example in California, that say things like, they're pretty derogatory, so I'm not going to read them out, but you can Google them, and they basically just poke fun at governments who are declaring themselves as sanctuary cities and saying that they're not going to cooperate with immigration officials who will, you know, try to deport people who are there illegally. Now, let's talk about elections, and we're going to talk about the different types of local elections. There are 4 different types of local elections, and when I say local elections, I'm talking about ways you can elect city officials. So you can have an at-large election where every voter votes on one person for every position that is up for election. The number of votes each person gets is equal to the number of positions up for election, and then the top vote getters are the city council. So the city, and again, the city charter can have one of these 4 types of elections as the method that the city is going to use to elect its city council. And I'll give you an example of how this all looks in practice on the next slide. An at-large place election is that every voter can vote for one person in each place, and candidates run for a certain place on the board. And so when you see a campaign sign that says, you know, Joe Blow running for seat number 5 on the city council, then that lets you know that they have an at-large place election. Single member districts are when voters can only vote for the candidate in their district. So my district may just be my neighborhood, and so I can vote for the candidate who's running from my district, but I can't vote for a candidate that's running in my city, but for the district next door. And then cumulative at large is just that every voter gets the number of votes that is equal to the number of positions up for election. If there are 6 council places up for election, every voter gets 6 votes. And then each voter can use the total votes in whatever combination they want, including multiple votes for one candidate. So let's start there, the cumulative at large, with our example. Our example is there are 6 council positions up for election. A cumulative at large means that I, as a voter, get 6 votes. Now, I can cast all of my 6 votes for one candidate if I really want that candidate to win, or I can split my votes 4 and 2 if there are 2 different candidates that I want to win, or I can vote one of my votes for 6 different candidates. At-large election means that every person can vote for 6 different people who are running. So if there are 6 council positions up for election, their names are just listed, and I can vote for 6 of those people. Now, I can't vote 6 times for one person because that's a cumulative at-large. Regular at-large is just I can cast 6 different votes for 6 different people. And then at the end of the day, the end of the voting day, whoever are the 6 top vote getters are the city council. In an at-large place election, every person votes for one candidate in each place, and they're listed by place. So, for example, candidate X and candidate Y might be running for place 1, and candidate A and candidate B are running for place 2. And so I could vote for somebody in place 1, either X or Y, and then I could vote for somebody in place 2, A or B, and so on throughout all 6 places. And then finally, single member districts means every person can vote for the candidate that's in that person's district, and it's 1 vote per district. So if I live in District 1, I cannot vote for a candidate who's running in District 2 or District 4. I can only vote in District 1. So let's talk about where cities get their money. How do cities get funded? It depends on the population. It depends on the taxes that are allowed by the city charter. Depends on property values, meaning if there's a lot of commercial property, if the property values are higher, then the city will get more in property taxes. And it depends on the needs of the residents. Does the city need to provide services for a lot of residents or not very many? Cities can have a sales tax, property tax, and they can also limit property taxes. They can freeze property taxes for some people, like people over 65. They can have a rollback property taxes so that the property tax increases don't get too outrageous. And this, if there are valuable pieces of property in the city, then the city can get a lot of money from property taxes. The city can issue user fees, so you can have a fee for gas or trash or city pools or city parks or something like that. They can issue a tax in the form of, just a tax for user fees, or you can actually have to pay when you go, use one of these things, or you can pay per month to get your trash picked up, things like that. And then also a city can issue bonds, which is just a public debt, limited to the percentage of the assessed property value in the city. So it's just kind of taking out a big loan to usually do some certain project, build a new park or expand one of the roads in the city, something like that. How do cities interact with the federal government? Well, the federal government can issue mandates to different states and that requires different cities to implement the mandate. And those can be funded or unfunded. So an example of a funded mandate would be the Americans with Disabilities Act, where the federal government says, every city building must comply with, certain access ramps and elevators and bathroom stalls and height of water fountains and things like that. But they would give money to the cities to implement those changes. Like the National Voter Registration Act or the Motor Voter Act, saying that someone can register to vote when they renew their driver's license. That is something that the federal government required, but then gave funding to the different local governments to help them implement this, extra requirement. Federal government also issues unfunded mandates, things like No Child Left Behind, meaning that everybody must meet certain educational standards in order to graduate high school. The Hazelwood Legacy Act, which was giving scholarships based on military service. Cameras in classrooms. The government required that classrooms have cameras, but then would not pay for the cameras. And so the city governments were having to pay for those. There are a few different forms of municipal governments, city governments. There is the council manager form. There is the mayor-council government with either a strong mayor or a weak mayor, and then the commission form of government. In a council manager form of government, the voters elect a mayor and they elect a city council. Now, the mayor can be one that presides over the city council, or the mayor could be just a member of the city council. The charter, again, would say what kind of power the mayor had. The city council, in turn, appoints or hires a city manager. And the city manager is the one that handles the day-to-day management of different departments, like the police department and the fire department and the city clerk and public works department, things like that. And so it's actually the city manager who is not elected, but appointed by the city council. You'll find this kind of government in Dallas and San Antonio, two big governments and two big cities in Texas who employ this form of government. Now, the mayor-council form of government, again, could have a strong mayor or a weak mayor. A strong mayor form of government, the voters elect the city council and they elect the mayor separately. The mayor presides over the city council, and the mayor also manages the city departments, like the police department and the sanitation department. And that's a strong mayor form of government that you can find in Houston. The commission form of government is the voters elect different commissioners that handle each of the different departments involved in the city government. And this is very rare, as is the weak mayor-council system, just because it is difficult to get any kind of cooperation and organization of the city government. The voters are electing, for example, someone to be in charge of the police department who knows a lot about law enforcement but nothing about sanitation, and so when it comes down to it, will argue all taxes should go to police department, public safety. None need to go to sanitation because I don't even know what sanitation does. And so we don't have any commission municipal governments, I don't believe, anymore in Texas, just because they're really hard to get anything accomplished. So I told you that we don't need to know things like trivia for the exams, but there are certain things that I think are helpful to know just as somebody who lives in Texas and is learning about Texas government. And this is one of those things. 5 of the top 15 largest cities in the United States are in Texas. I think that's a pretty significant thing to know. Houston, San Antonio, Dallas, Austin, and Fort Worth. When a city grows to the size of one of these, top 15 largest cities in the United States, it needs a lot more in city services. If there is flight away from the city, then the empty areas decrease the amount of money, tax money that's available. So for example, say there is a mall in a city and it brings in a ton of sales tax and the property value is fairly high. But what happens when people start moving out of the city and the mall closes? Well, then you have a big empty area that is not bringing in any tax revenue, sales tax revenue, and is not valuable. The large Texas cities are very diverse. None of these 5 cities in Texas are a majority Anglo. They are a majority minority. And that's interesting because it really does not fit with what people nationally think about Texans. They think, all Texans are just people, with big blonde hair or, cowboys, white Anglo cowboys, like they've seen in Dallas or some other TV show. But that's actually not true. All of these cities, Houston, San Antonio, Dallas, Austin, and Fort Worth, are a majority minority. So let's talk about some of these cities. So Houston is the city over there on the top left. It is the 4th largest city in the United States. The population was about almost 2 million people in 2000, and then in 2017 it was 2.3 million. It is in Harris County, and I'll show you in the next slide where it is located. San Antonio is the bottom left, and it is 7th in size in the United States. It had 1.14 million people in 2000 and 1.5 million people in 2017. It is in Bexar County. And you say that Bear like B-E-A-R. The X is silent, so sometimes you'll hear non-Texans say Bexar County, but that's not true. Dallas is the 9th largest city in the United States. Had a population of 1.18 million people in 2000 and had a population of 1.32 million in 2017. It is in Dallas County. And it is the picture that is right in the middle of the top row. Austin is 11th in the United States in size. It was about 660,000 people in 2000 and almost a million people in 2017. It is in Travis County. It is also the capital of Texas. And it is the city that is the bottom, like the bottom right in the pictures. And then finally, Fort Worth, 15th in size in the United States. About 500,000 people in 2000, 870,000 people in 2017, and it is in Tarrant County, same county as Tarrant County College, and that is the top right picture. And this is just a little geography. In case you've not lived in Texas your entire life, you can see where Austin is right there in the middle with the star. Fort Worth and Dallas are close to the top right of the map. Houston is down near the coast, and San Antonio is kind of makes a triangle with Houston and Austin. If you divided Texas into 4 different quadrants, northwest, southwest, northeast, southeast, you would see that the eastern part of the state really has most of the population. It has the 5 biggest cities are located in those in that area: Fort Worth, Dallas, and in the northeast, and Austin, San Antonio, and Houston in the southeast. So let's look at an example. Like I told you, we're going to talk about Hurst, Texas, the city of Hurst, where TCC Northeast is located, as an example of a city government. So the people of Hurst elect a mayor and a city council. And the mayor and city council then hire a city manager, and that city manager and the deputy city manager will oversee all of the different city services, like the parks and recreation, library, and also all of the different city committees. So planning, and community development, and police and public works, things like that. So that is a council manager city. So this is just some information from the City of Hurst website, the City of Hurst publication, describing the government. The City of Hurst operates under the council manager form of government, in which the city council is responsible for all city policy, and the city manager is responsible for the day-to-day operations of the city. The city manager is appointed by the city council and serves at their pleasure, and so basically he's just hired, like a job. The city council is composed of 7 members, 6 council members, and the mayor, all elected at large, nonpartisan bias, to serve overlapping 2-year terms. The mayor is elected to serve a 2-year term as presiding officer of the city council meetings and serves as the official head of the city for legislative and ceremonial purposes. The City Council is the city's legislative and policy-making body. The City Council is responsible for passing ordinances and resolutions necessary for the governing of the city, as well as for setting direction of city policy. The city manager is responsible for the overall administration of the city. The responsibility includes implementation of the City Council's goals and strategies. The city manager, with the help of staff, provides the City Council with information needed to fulfill its legislative role, basically to know what laws to vote for, or what regulations to vote for. In 1930 in Texas, there were 400 local governments with the council manager form of government. And I'm sorry, that was nationwide if I said that was in Texas. And today there are over 2,800 local governments that operate under this same form of government, council manager form of government. And if you looked at the City of Hurst charter, that would tell you what powers different departments had, and how the city actually runs. If you had a question about that, remember you would check the document, and that document would be the city charter. It's all online, and you would look at the different provisions of the city charter that would tell you, what kind of recall elections are allowed, what kind of alcoholic beverage zoning there may be, things like that. Okay, so I told you that this lecture is divided into 3 different parts: the municipal government part, the county government part, and the special districts or councils part. Now, we spent a whole lot of time talking about municipal government. I promise you we're not going to spend that much time talking about county and special districts. So most of the lecture is over. I don't want you to think that, oh gosh, we're only a third of the way through. No, we're just moving on to topic number 2. In Texas, this is another example of trivia that I would like you to know as somebody who lives in Texas. In Texas, there are 254 counties. So this map shows you where all the counties are and what their names are. Some of them are big pieces of land, some of them are tiny pieces of land. But regardless, there are 254 counties in Texas. If this sounds like it's a lot of counties, it's because it is. Delaware has the fewest number of counties, and that is 3 counties. Georgia is next in line behind Texas. Texas is number 1 on the number of counties there are. Georgia is number 2, and they have 159 counties. So you see that we almost have 100 more counties than Georgia does, and they are the second most number of counties. Now, something that's interesting is that county governments are all organized in the same manner, and so they all have the same structure, and their power is given to them by the Texas legislature. So if you live in Harris County that has 4 million people in it, and is home to Houston, the largest city in Texas, as far as population goes, then your county is going to have the same structure and the same powers of the different officers as Loving County, which has 82 people in it. So you're going to have the same, it's going to look exactly the same in the election. Counties work for the state. They carry out state law, they collect state taxes, they oversee state and federal elections. They do not work for the local government. So the county is not going to be interested in city level elections or city level government, except to the extent that the city is a part of the county, and so they may, take some interest in it. But the county does not have the goal of working for the local government and like collecting local taxes, things like that. So just like I said, if you are in the largest county in Texas or the smallest county in Texas, that county will have a commissioner court, a county clerk, county tax assessor collector, county dispute resolution service, a sheriff, a constable, a district attorney, a county court, a county judge, a commissioner court, I already said commissioner court, sorry, and a county treasurer and a county auditor. Again, this may be everybody that lives in the county if it's a small county, if they're, with all of the different elected officials. But again, you're not going to have more than one district attorney in each county. There are only 254 district attorneys in Texas. However, in some counties there are 100 assistant district attorneys. In some counties there are 0 assistant district attorneys, and so the offices may be bigger, but as far as the elected officials, there would still only be 1. So the commissioner's court, something to remember about the commissioner court, even though it says court, it is not a judicial court like you would think of, where attorneys come and present evidence and there's a judge that rules on that evidence. A commissioner's court is a group of 4 precincts that determine voting precincts and locations. They supervise elections. They conduct hearing on ordinances. They deal with state hospital admissions. So again, in the largest or the smallest county, there would be 4 different precincts, each with a commissioner that serves on the commissioner court. So when I talked about supervising elections, this is, after the primary, which is supervised by the actual political parties, the private organizations. This is for the general elections where the county takes over and supervises the election, determines where the voting locations are going to be, things like that. And state hospital admissions, when I said that you can't vote if you have been found to be mentally incompetent, the commissioner court is one place you could be found to be mentally incompetent and thus admitted to a state hospital. Okay, county clerk is the chief record keeper. So if you need your birth certificate, you need a death certificate of someone, you want your marriage license, you go to the county clerk's office. They also are involved in state elections. The county tax office, where the tax assessor collector works, deals with license plates, vehicle transfers. They collect taxes for the county. So when you pay your property taxes, you pay them to the tax assessor collector. And if you need to go get a new license plate, or you need to sell a car and transfer title to someone else, you also go to the tax assessor collector office. The County Dispute Resolution Service is an office that will oversee and try to work through some small civil matters, not criminal, but civil. So think about a landlord-tenant or a dispute between two neighbors, something that is a small-ish dispute could be handled by the Dispute Resolution Service in the county. The sheriff enforces the laws and oversees the county jail, and the constable serves summons, like summons to show up at jury duty, summons to show up at court. Put a pin in that jury duty for a second. And law enforcement. So a constable can write tickets. When I say serve a summons to show up at jury duty, you get those in the mail. However, if you don't show up to jury duty, and we'll talk about this in a later lecture about the court systems, if you don't show up to jury duty, then the judge who is presiding over the case where you were supposed to be assigned to jury duty can ask the constable to go serve you with a summons to appear in court and explain to the judge why you did not show up to jury duty. That happens. I've seen it happen. Okay. District attorney prosecutes on behalf of the county, on behalf of the state. So when you see like a criminal case, it'll be, you know, state versus John Doe. Well, that is the district attorney. The county attorney gives legal advice to the commissioner's court. The county court hears civil and criminal cases. And so again, there's only one county court in every county. We'll talk about that later in the court system, but again, Loving County has one county court and Harris County has one county court, even though their population is about 4 million people different. The county judge and the commissioner court working together deals with budget, taxes, ordinances. You've probably heard a lot about the county judges recently, because the county judges are the ones who are issuing the mask ordinances. So County Judge Clay Jenkins in Dallas County was, you know, the one that would say you have to wear a mask in public, or businesses, you know, cannot open due to the pandemic, things like that. And then finally, the county treasurer and the county auditor keep financials, like financial records. They keep the money. They, you know, explain to the voters where the money has been spent and how the budget is playing out. Now, something to remember is that all of these different offices are partisan. So when you go to vote, you'll see two people running for sheriff, one is a Republican and one is a Democrat, or two people running as a district attorney, one is a Republican and one is a Democrat. So whereas city elections are nonpartisan, county elections are partisan. So let's talk about Tarrant County, Texas. The Tarrant County government is online. It will tell you every single kind of, kind of person elected to a certain, like the county clerk or the constable. But it will also tell you their extent of their authority and what kind of things they handle. So if you have a question about whether or not something falls under the jurisdiction of one office or another, you can go to the Tarrant County website and it will tell you all about the different county offices. So what is some of the problem with having this county government structure? Well, it's rigid, and so, like we said, Loving County with 82 people has the same system of government as Harris County with 4.2 million people. So there's no deviation from the rules. It's duplicative. The city and the state and the county may all have different sectors of law enforcement, for example, or judges, and that is, can be kind of confusing, but definitely overlaps. County government is a lot of a spoils system, which means that I think that, some people would call it a good old boys network, but just those who are active in a party that is the dominant party in the county will be the ones to be elected, not necessarily the best person for the job. And then finally, it just contributes to our issue in Texas with such a long ballot. So many people you need to research before you actually go to the polls. Okay, finally, we are going to go to the last third topic, and it is special districts and councils. That's another form of local government. Special districts are things that have a single service objective, so they do one thing. They are the most numerous kind of local governments in Texas. They were created so that taxes to fund a certain special service or special place would not need to be raised for everyone, just the people who needed those services. But if you are in one of those areas and you are being asked to vote on the different leaders of that special district, you are probably not going to know anybody who's running or what they do. It's confusing. It's on our very long ballot. And so they are often called the invisible government. They are governed by a commissioner court of the county or the board of directors that is created by the document that creates the special district. Now, a special district can tax property. They can tax sales within the district. So if there's an 8% state sales tax, they can lop on another 0.25%. And so in their district, you have an 8.25% sales tax. They can issue bonds, which just means borrowing a big chunk of money. They can borrow money directly. They can enter into a contract. They can sue and be sued. They can own real property or personal property. They can purchase it. They can sell it. They can lease it. And then they can engage in eminent domain, which means that if there is a piece of land that they need, they can take that land and give the person just a fair value for the land. Now, the problem with these special governments or special districts is that, again, they duplicate the same functions that may be performed by the county or the city that they are in, or the state. There's not a whole lot of transparency in their dealings, so they're more run like a business than like the government, where their records are just open and you can go look at them whenever you want. And there's no review process. So really the only thing they're held accountable to are the voters, and that's tricky because we don't always know who these people are on these different special districts or these special district governments and what they do. I've put a list here of some different kind of special districts, like a library district or the mosquito control district, just districts that can overlap different cities or counties. But for example, if there's a mosquito control district and we need to pay for that, it might overlap some of Tarrant County and some of Johnson County, but all of Tarrant County doesn't need to pay an increase in tax for a mosquito problem they may have in the southeast part of Tarrant County, for example. An example of one of these special districts is the Tarrant County College District. And the Tarrant County College District is run by a board of trustees that has 7 members elected to 6-year terms that overlap. Tarrant County College can issue taxes, and they collect a 0.13% tax rate, and that means like 13 cents on the dollar. And in 2018, the taxes that they were able to collect was $259 million for Tarrant County College. And so you'll see that they are elected in nonpartisan elections. And so those are the 7 people that are currently serving on the Tarrant County College District Board of Trustees. A council of governments is just a subgroup of members from different governments. They can come together to kind of combine their resources, and it also helps when they are trying to offer a service that would overlap a bunch of different governments, a bunch of different pieces of counties or cities. So some examples here are Homeland Security, law enforcement training. So there may be a council of government that engages in training all the firefighters or all the police officers in North Texas or something like that. Environmental planning, which again, environmental issues probably span over multiple cities, multiple counties. 911 districts, services to the elderly, so maybe paratransit or different, services that can be provided to elderly people in the area, which may span over multiple cities or multiple counties. And then also transit councils. So, for example, the Trinity Railway Express will go from Tarrant County to Dallas County. It crosses through Hearst and Fort Worth and Dallas and Grand Prairie, and so it is a council of government that spans a number of different governments. The North Central Texas Council of Governments is an association by and for local governments established to assist in regional planning. So it is a number of different counties and cities within those counties in North Texas. So Tarrant County, but all the way up to the Red River, west to like Hood County, east to you know, down in kind of East Texas, Northeast Texas. It is a voluntary association, so no county has to be involved in it. No city has to be involved. Its purpose is to strengthen the individual and collective power of local governments and help them recognize regional opportunities, like sports teams, eliminate unnecessary duplication, and make joint decisions. So that way you have, for example, different counties working together for the common goal of a large airport that's going to benefit both of the counties. And that way they're not competing against each other. They can band together and compete against places like Houston or El Paso or, you know, Oklahoma City or something like that. North Central Texas Council of Governments programs and departments encompass transportation planning, like I said, airports, environment and development, aging and disability resources, emergency preparedness, like for hurricanes or tornadoes or, you know, snowstorms if we had snowstorms, demographic research, regional training, for example, like I said, fire or police training, criminal justice, 911 emergency numbers, a regional police academy, and more. So for example, one time I was in on I-20 right between Arlington and Grand Prairie. So I was right on the Dallas and Tarrant County lines, and I saw a fantastical accident with a pickup truck who flipped over and flew over the lane of oncoming traffic. And so immediately I slammed on my brakes and called 911. And because of where I was located, I just had to call 911, and they were able to transfer me to the right place, the right county, the right city, so that the right police department would show up, the right EMTs would show up, because I didn't really even know what county I was in or what city I was in. An example of a council of governments is the DFW Airport Council. It includes cities like Dallas, Fort Worth, Irving, Euless, Grapevine, and Coppell, and counties, Dallas and Tarrant County. The DFW Airport is larger than Manhattan, so it's a big chunk of land, and it spans over all of these different cities and counties. It's the 4th busiest airport in the world by aircraft movement. It has its own zip code, its own police, fire, emergency, medical technicians. And so when we talk about duplicative services, the police who are at DFW, and they're in the DFW Council, also have the same jurisdiction, or have jurisdiction over a person, just like maybe Dallas County or Tarrant County or the state of Texas or the city of Dallas or Fort Worth or Irving or Euless or Grapevine and Coppell. And so when we talk about duplicative services, this is what we're talking about. DFW has a board of directors, and there are 12 members on it. 11 of them are appointed by city councils in those cities. 7 are from Dallas, city of Dallas, 4 from the city of Fort Worth. And that correlates with each city's ownership interest in the airport. In order to facilitate communication between and among the airport and its neighbors, a 12th non-voting board position representing one of the airport's 4 neighboring cities, Irving, Grapevine, Euless, and Coppell, is filled on an annual rotating basis. So this year might be Irving, next year is Grapevine, and so on. DFW Airport Board is the main body responsible for governing DFW Airport. The board can enter into contracts without the approval of the owner city's council, but their approval is required for budget, bond, sales, and other measures. So they can contract to things like, you know, who's gonna provide services, meal services or like food services within DFW Airport. But if they're going to enter into a bond or issue a bond, that has to be approved by the City Council. The Board of Directors appoints the airport's Chief Executive Officer, who has the day-to-day operations responsibility, so kind of like the City Manager. The Chief Executive Officer then hires his staff to help him run the day-to-day operations of the airport.